The 3D TV venture is one of the most comical mistakes in modern business history, right up there with the Betamax. The mistake was that manufacturers focused on innovation versus taking into account the current status of the marketplace and the other players that would have needed to get involved. In order for a 3D TV to be usable, 3D content has to be available. Content producers and providers have to agree to make 3D content available. A much larger orchestra was needed to be managed beyond just making a great product and assuming it would catch on. We see this mistake happen a lot. People often wrongly assume that if they make a great product, the rest will fall into place. The product itself, believe it or not, is only a small component in the complex architecture of success. People also overvalue innovation way too much. You can't get a big picture of a particular marketplace, its players, the relationships between its players, its topography, etc., without sitting still and thinking about it, i.e., meditating and concentrating on it in as much detail as possible. And of course, also acknowledging that what you figured out is quite possibly wrong. Analysis plus humility is essential to the decision-making process involved in reaching out towards a goal. Again, that's the equation, analysis plus humility. So here's an analysis trick. Don't try to perceive the whole thing at once. It would be overwhelming if I sat down and said, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about math right now. I first got to figure out adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, then algebra, trig, calculus, differential equations, abstract concepts, topology, etc., 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 etc. Even then, I might be able to understand a fraction, no pun intended, of the math research that my frequent bass player James is working on for his second PhD. It seems to be more efficient to consider something in its various parts and details and then mentally assemble those components. There's such a story about an ancient Indian teacher that gave a dead fish to his student. The instructor's plan was to leave the student alone with the fish, and he said he would return when the student was ready. The student was asked to observe the fish carefully and be ready to report upon what he had noticed about the fish. The student was then left alone with the fish. There was nothing especially interesting about that fish. It was like many other fish that he had seen before. He noticed that it had fins and scales, and a mouth and eyes, and a tail. In a half hour, he felt certain that he had observed all about the fish that there was to be perceived. But the teacher remained away. Time rolled on, and the youth, having nothing else to do, began to grow restless and weary. He started to hunt up the teacher, but he failed to find him, and so he had to return and gaze again at the wearisome fish. Several hours had passed, and he knew but little more about the fish than he did in the first place. He went out to lunch, and when he returned, it was still a case of watching the fish. He felt disgusted and discouraged, and wished he had never come to this teacher, whom it seemed was a stupid old man after all, one away behind the times. And then in order to kill time, he began to count the scales. When completed, he counted the spines of the fins. Then he began to draw a picture of the fish. In drawing the picture, he noticed that the fish had no eyelids. Shortly after, the teacher returned, and after ascertaining what the youth had observed, he left rather disappointed, telling the boy to keep on looking, and maybe he would actually see something. Now this put the boy on his mettle, and he began to work with his eyes, putting down little details that had escaped him before, but which now seemed very plain to him. He began to catch the secret of observation. Little by little, he brought to light new objects of interest about the fish. But this did not suffice his teacher, who kept him at work at the same fish for 3 whole days. At the end of that time, the student really knew something about the fish, and better than all, had acquired the skills and habit of careful observation and perception in detail. The student applied this information-gathering technique to his future endeavors and went on to become a huge success in almost everything he set out to accomplish. Not only can we develop the existing senses by extensive practice and use, but by exercising our mental skills, we can help expand their scope. This will help us a great deal when it comes to dealing with the new and unexpected challenges that will spring up as we achieve our dreams. To quote the wise James Allen, to grow in self-control, in patience, in equanimity is to grow in strength and power. And you can only thus grow by focusing your consciousness upon a principle. As a child, after making many and vigorous attempts to walk unaided, at last succeeds, after numerous falls, in accomplishing this, so you must enter the way of power by first attempting to stand alone. Break away from the tyranny of custom, tradition, conventionality, and the opinions of others until you succeed in walking lonely and erect among men. Rely upon your own judgment. Be true to your own conscience. Follow the light that is within you. All outward lights are so many will-o'-the-wisps. There will be those who will tell you that you are foolish, that your judgment is faulty, that your conscience is all awry, and that the light within you is darkness, but heed them not. If what they say is true, the sooner you, as a searcher for wisdom, find it out, the better. And you can only make the discovery by bringing your powers to the test. Therefore, pursue your course bravely. Your conscience is at least your own, and to follow it is to be a man. To follow the conscience of another is to be a slave. You will have many falls, will suffer many wounds, will endure many buffetings for a time, but press on in faith. Believe that sure and certain victory lies ahead. Search for a rock, a principle, and having found it, cling to it. Get it under your feet and stand erect upon it, until at last, immovably fixed upon it, you succeed in defying the fury of the waves and storms of selfishness.